Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second day of the FTTH conference. Opportunities and challenges of a multi-gigabit world. Very happy to see you early in the morning. And without a jingle, we will start our panel discussion. We have our distinguished panelists who will emphasize of the importance of optical fiber infrastructure as a means to bridge the global digital divides. We will discuss the transformative potential of multi-gigabit speeds on fiber, propelling us towards a greener, more connected world and digitalization. The evolution of a fiber broadband is not merely keeping up the pace of technology, it's driving into the digital renaissance, unlocking new services and revenue streams. We will round up our discussion of the challenges faced by service providers managing our networks, with spotlight on technology advances in fiber monitoring, broadband technologies, and automated correlation for advanced customer care efficiencies. Let me then introduce our distinguished panelists. We will start with Andrew Bender. He is CTO and Head of Strategy for the network infrastructure, fixed networks. We will continue with Hans Neff. He is a Senior Director of the ZTE Group. Speaking further with Paul Howard, ISP Sales Director of NP-Link. And we will end up with Rowan Kelly. He is CTO Advance for EMEA and the APAC region. And I will introduce them in more details in a minute, one by one. But before we start, let you introduce myself. My name is Jan Schindler. I'm Market Intelligence Director of the Prismin Group, but I'm also part of the FTTH Council as a board member. So now, let's not waste any more time, and let's start with Andrew Bender. Andrew is a CTO and Head of Strategy, as I said, for the network infrastructure networks of Nokia. He's responsible of a team of industry experts managing the technology initiatives, industry engagements, and ecosystem strategy. Works in partnership with the Nokia Ballad. He's been in the industry, correct me if I'm wrong, more than 3 decades. So he's very experienced, and he will start with his perspective on the multi-gigabit. Welcome with me, Andrew.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us here, and thank you, Jan, for the introduction. So, I'm Andrew Bender. I'm the Chief Technology Officer and Head of Strategy for the Fixed Networks business at Nokia. It's great to see you all here, and certainly the vibrant participation that we have at FTTH Council on this 20th anniversary of the organization. So, as Jan got us together to talk about this session, transformation was the key theme. I will talk about 5 important dimensions of transformation that we see in the industry today. The first is this, big news for 2024 with the advent of multi-gigabit service. In 2024, this will be the time horizon where the 10 gigabit class technology called XGS-PON in Europe will exceed the shipments of GPON, the 1 gigabit class technology, for the first time. In the keynote yesterday, if you attended that, you heard that there's a 70% pass in Europe of households, so good progress in the fiberization, delivery of fiber broadband, but certainly more work to do on the path to copper sunset. What we have seen in the industry, however, is that even when we achieve this kind of vibrant full fiberization, there's still some level of subscribers, households, individuals that aren't able to be connected cost effectively or easily, 5, 10, 15%. So another important topic is the advent of 5G fixed wireless access. So what you see here on the right, coincidentally, in 2024 is the time horizon for here in the European region where 5G fixed wireless access will exceed for the first time the shipment of LTE, the prior generation of fixed wireless access technology. We believe that there will be two main technology platforms that are used to provide broadband internet access: fiber everywhere it's feasible as the first and best option, and 5G fixed wireless access for the rest. The second important trend here is the evolution. 10 gigabit technology we just talked about being an important node for fiber broadband will be the most popular node in 2024 in the foreseeable future, but innovation continues in this domain. If you attended the workshop session given by our own Anna Pesovich back 2 days ago at the start of the conference, you would have heard her talk about 25G technology. One of the things that we've learned as Nokia is that the work that we have done for XGS, if we do a little bit more, we can provide a higher tier of service that also confers a benefit of energy intensity or energy per bit. A lot of discussion in the industry now is about fiber being a green option for broadband connectivity and a 25G symmetrical service as the next step from 10G helps deliver on that promise. Also, coincidentally, back in Paris at Network X, if any of you were there, there was an important announcement by a major global operator, a US-based operator, Google Fibre, in terms of commercializing and adopting this technology simultaneously with the advent of Wi-Fi 7. Now, Wi-Fi 7 is a last meter access technology that's associated with broadband that has a typical maximum rate on the order of 24 gigabits. So having a correspondence between the last meter now being beyond 10 gigabit and the fiber broadband access technology we think is an important step. But there's also a path beyond this. So industry standards activity is just coming to a close on the 50 gig symmetrical option. As a next step, we foresee this being commercialized over the next 1 to 2 years. However, in the work that we've done with Bell Labs, which Jan mentioned at the outset, we've also shown, just like with 25 gig PON, that by doing a little more work, we can also get to 100 gigabits and beyond. So we will proceed to talk about what happens with these higher speed platforms and how they might be applied. So various beyond 10 gig options are possible, and when we look at what is beyond consumer broadband or high-speed internet, after we succeed in that fiberization mission, the next step, we believe, is what we describe as fiber for everything. This means providing connectivity for businesses, institutions, things. When fiber becomes the new copper after this copper sunset transition that occurs, there's an idea of opportunistic connectivity that comes from the pervasive availability of fiber, where not just consumers, not just end users, but these various other entities will benefit from the robust fiberization that occurs. However, in order to serve these classes of customers, there are unique technical requirements beyond just speed. Those include deterministic low latency, minimum packet delay variation, as engineers would say, we call that jitter, the kind of reliability, service level agreements, industrialization that business customers, business critical applications require. And the last element is having a network, having a capability that is programmable, that is software defined to make a network that is addressable by applications. So key question here is the business impact of making these changes. We're also often invited by service providers to explain or help solve for how do we monetize the fiber network. So what's shown here is not just our imagination as Nokia, but work that we have done with an analyst firm, McKinsey, to talk about the monetization opportunities for CSPs. And you see various options here. Wholesale services, obviously enterprise connectivity is an option. Applications like mobile transport in a converged network, and a new idea of a different strategy for monetization or service revenue streams that come from this aspect of software addressable or programmable networks. This is an example of that being put to use. We believe that when the network becomes software addressable, it's possible to use a technology called network slicing to provide a discrete resource partition that provides guaranteed resources for special applications to assure performance, quality, network parameters, behaviors that benefit work from home applications, speed boosts for gaming, compelling virtual experiences as we transition from 2D to 3D entertainment, and the already mentioned case of business critical industrial IoT all benefit from being able to make use of this network programmability. An important aspect of this is the aspect that this is dynamic and software controlled. If now applications have the ability to talk to the network, make these requests on a point-in-time, instantaneous basis, this creates the opportunity for indirect monetization, meaning new revenue streams that come from content publishers, from employers, from game platforms and vertical industries now benefit the service provider and ultimately benefit the end user in terms of this slicing capability that goes all the way to the device where the service experience happens. Last trend here, smarter broadband. This is about the mission that we have as vendors. We're all vendors here in this panel, but ultimately what service providers, our customers, care about is the outcomes for the end user. We can break technological barriers, innovate, fully fiberize networks, pass homes, get subscribers connected, but if subscribers don't realize and feel the material benefit of all this work that we're doing, we have not fulfilled the promise. So there is an opportunity for technology to be applied to make networks smarter, and in doing so, not make them more complex, but make them easier for everybody, for end users, consumers, businesses, environments to benefit from this connectivity. As the network grows and changes, its capabilities will also have to grow. So having the modularity, the ability to introduce new applications and behaviors is important in a software-defined way. And if you have a robust way of doing that, by the way, subscribers, other entities will pay for this. So that's an opportunity as well. And the last example here is as we get invited into the home, into the office, into the environment, CSPs have a new role to play in what happens with the network on an end-to-end basis or in the last meter. So in order to support that mission, creating devices, creating products, creating solutions that users want to see, want to use, feel good about having in their environment that are sustainable, this is an important part of the equation. So with that, I will say thank you for allowing me to open the discussion, Jan, and I look forward to our panel.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for your great presentation. Very insightful. We will have in Q&A a sort of panel discussion in the end, so we will have our next speaker now. Our next speaker, Hans, will start about bringing his perspective on the challenges and opportunities And Hans, let me introduce you a little bit more in details. Has more than 25 years of experience in the telecommunication industry. As a consultant, an integrator for operators and vendors end-to-end. And with that, you have more experience and you will do that in a moment. I give you the floor, Hans, and welcome.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to stand here for a topic which touches the life of all of us. Because, let's be frank and honest, connectivity to the internet is an essential part of all our life. The thing is, about 34% of the population have no internet access. So this connectivity to the internet is something which is not equally shared. Not equally shared on the probability of access, not equally shared on the speed, and to be frank and honest, not equally shared on the performance finally. So if we take a look, 80% of developed country population has an access, 36 of the developing countries, 82 in the city and 45 in the rural areas, or 92 basically in high-income countries and just, let's say, less than 30 in none. It is also, let's say, visible and proven by studies and by real sets that investments into good internet access has an impact to the GDPR and helps basically developing regions and generating jobs. If we take a little bit a look on internet access, Fibre 2X, there is a trend ongoing, a journey ongoing, which deals, number one, with an increased accessibility, an increased way of homes passed and homes connected, where we are at the moment at about 45%. And we will reach basically, with a set, about 50–55% by 27. This is globally spoken, to be frank. And on the picture on the right side, you directly can see you have their variations between Latin America, North America, Europe, Asian markets, which are drastically. And where you can see, yes, all of them have a growth spot, all of them have a trend to grow, but that nevertheless means there is still potential to go for. If we take a look on the second aspect of journey, it is a technological journey. Internet connectivity started with 1966 with the first modem types and 2.4 kbaud, and increased step by step. And we had then GPON, 1 gigabit services, XGPON, XGS-PON services, which are now the major deployed set, yes. And there is upcoming the 50 GPON series, which helps to go further and helps basically to connect services better. Now, 50 GPON is not just more speed. Sorry, the name says it. Yes, I understood. But the thing is, you want, or some of us have to get rid of copper. Copper is connectivity. Copper is used for pulsing. You have their timestamp signal in it. Copper is used for clocking, so you have their machines which are using the signal out of the line to monitor sets and alarms on service sets with a clocking mechanism on it, even on power. So 50 GPON, we have heard already before with the speaker, has opportunities to give. We are talking here about slicing, this was already mentioned very well, where you assign a certain bandwidth to a certain application, to a certain service. So you can have on a split factor an enterprise customer, you guaranteed 10 gigabits symmetrical down up, and the others share a service class, or you can even go lower. You have the ability of a very low jitter. The value is you use this for a clocking mechanism, which takes over basically the clocking beat of a copper line and helps you basically replacing that, helping there to go further. And for sure you have this low jitter and high capacity story where you say, okay, you can have higher split rates. These are values which help through and help out to go for the next steps, even for 200G. And yes, the last mile connectivity or the last meters connectivity in your home is Wi-Fi, whatever. Now Wi-Fi 7 is a point, which help to get better connectivity, less interference, better reliability, better assignment of services and resources. So at the end, it's a good end-to-end connectivity story. And the values this, let's say, gigabit network in general means, specifically FTTH means, You give the customers an unparalleled speed. You allow them to have services with a real minimal latency, and it is a very, very robust and sustainable connectivity. So even the energy consumption, as we said before, is lower than on the copper networks. The environment itself helps, or is helped by it, because it's a future-proof structure. So if you now have an optical line at the ground, it doesn't mean it stops with 1 gigabit or 10 gigabit or 50 gigabit. So if you talk about the Shannon theorem, we're ending up with 20 tera. So don't get me wrong, I don't think this will happen, but there is still space to grow. Now, if we talk about sustainability for the environment, means you have there something in the ground which per se consumes less energy than everything before. And the scalability allows you to deploy whatever you need, wherever you need them. So it gives you benefits for the end user. It gives you benefits for the environment. It has a broad variety of impacts. It has an impact to the quality of life. It has a socio-economic impact. It has an impact to the digitalization of the environment. It has an impact to the environment itself, security, and honestly speaking, also an impact for the local economy. In the local economy, if we take a look at this, it helps to do job creation in the building process, in the existence process. It gives you better connectivity. It allows you working from home. It attracts investments. It enhances the productivity of the area. It raises the GDPR in the area. And it fosters innovation by having access to new, easy accessible, let's say, data in the internet. The quality of life is impacted because you're empowering emerging technologies. So high-speed network enables you basically to emerge technologies to a new level. It accelerates your digital transformation. It improves the content creation process and the content consumption. And for sure, the virtual collaboration between the environments is fostered by all that. Socio-economically is you have there really a high impact on the economic, advanced and commercial expansion layer, where digital economy is stimulated, where you have smart city promotions, where you have smart industry, smart campus promotions, and you have talent and enterprise attraction. The education and the e-learning process is simplified as you can basically work, learn, study from home. And last but not least, it is revolutioning the healthcare services. You have telemedicine integrations. You can do video calls at home, get a consultancy there. You have a possibility of remote health monitoring or others. If you take a look at the fourth, my counting is a little bit of a problem, aspect of the set, we're talking about the general digitalization impact. So it fosters your smart city environment. It helps you in the distributed cloud computing environment structure. The e-commerce and the digital market is growing by that. And with the smart manufacturing and digital industry 4.0, for example, with an FTTR approach, you have there really the next step of connectivity for your SMEs, for your enterprises. If you take a look for the environment, it reduces your energy consumption. It integrates intelligent solutions directly together. And FTT lowers or reduces the amount of physical presence at the end. On the drawback, you have to say the management of the recycling of the optical lines in the ground are not 100% clarified because they remain there for a pretty long time then. The deployment of the FTTH has an impact because you have to dig, you have to put it to the ground. It is an infrastructure, let's say, take-in you have to take. And it directly or indirectly contributes to the environmental effects. So you use then more electronic devices because your connectivity is better, because it's easier to get access to, so it has then an effect too. Last but not least, we're talking here about the security set, where we talk about an increased attack surface. You have a faster speed, you have a broader access, a lot of more people can access this service and can basically attack easier on a broader surface set. It's still a data privacy and security, let's say, problem raised by this because you have there more data to transport, you have more data to transfer, you have more services to integrate. It is going to be automated, it's going to be with an SDN controller or an orchestrator there. And last but not least, we have already a gap between the cybersecurity skills available on the market to protect environments and the cybersecurity on the skills on the market doing the opposite. So we have to see how this opening reacts there. If we take a look on FTTH in general, you have challenges. Number one, you have to have the money to invest to build it. That's a very frank and easy shot. Number two, I think the regulatory landscape and the founding landscape needs a little improvement to prevent a 4 times, 5 times overbuild on the one side and a no build on the other side. So there has to be something done. And last but not least, it will help to mitigate some layers of the digital inclusion or unbalanced set, but you have to build in an affordable way. If you build some optical lines in a rural area and your monthly ARPU is about 200 euros, you still will not have a big take-up rate there. So you have to have it in an affordable way. This all together gives the picture what values, what challenges, what hurdles have to be taken. And for sure, there are technical innovations which are dealing to fix some of the issues. You have there, for the 2B segment, for the 2C segment, the FTTR solution. You have there 2 gigabit direct connection. We have heard Wi-Fi 7. We have heard 50G on services. We have heard bandwidth guarantee. So these are all services which work together. One aspect we have to see here in addition, it is here we're talking about the fixed access. Everything you do there has to be transported somewhere. So if you guarantee a certain bandwidth, if you guarantee a certain service level and customer experience quality on the access point, you have to foster and plan this through using SRv6 or segment routing on the transport, guaranteeing the bandwidth end-to-end, ensuring customer experience quality end-to-end. So this is the main aspect to go for. And this basically for all scenarios. So giving a fast and short shot, there are challenges there, there are opportunities there, and we can see investment in this area helps to raise the GDPR, helps to generate jobs, helps to help our social, socio-economic, economical environment infrastructure. And very frank and honest, it's the way forward and the only way forward to have an infrastructure ready for the future. Thank you for your participation on the set. It was a great pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Hans, for your very interesting presentations and perspective. Let me now introduce our next speaker, Paul Howard, ISP Sales Director of TP-Link. Paul has been in the telecommunication network industry since he left school, starting as an apprentice of British Telecom over 40 years ago. And for the last 25 years, he's been working in pre-sales, sales, and solution-focused for the connectivity for the most technology types. Please welcome with me, Paul Howard.
Thank you. Thank you, and good morning. I guess I should congratulate a lot of you for making it here for the first session of the day after the night's frivolities, we'll call them that, and everything that's gone on. So thank you. So I want to actually follow on from what Andrew was saying. You'd think we've actually spoken to each other before all of this, because a lot of what he said fits right into what I want to be talking about. So a lot of what we talk about here in the challenges, with FTTH and everything with the multi-gig, actually that falls into the home user. As Andrew was saying, that it's not all about the delivery of the broadband. It's not all about the speed that we get there. It's what can we put in the customer premises, in their homes, that can utilize the speeds that were ever increasing to them with the increases in the multi-gig. So that brings on challenges about the products that we actually want to put in the home. But also, we need to consider for the ISP, as Andrew was also saying, there's the challenges for them to be able to monetize, but also for being able to operate cost effectively. With the increases in the speeds ever happening, always advancing, there is the impact on the ISP where they need to be able to deploy these products and keep up with the speeds that are being delivered because of the demands also of the customer. The customer saying, okay, I'm now paying for a X speed on my broadband, and what I need to be able to do is utilize that. I want to be able to connect to that. I want to be able to have my connectivity. I want to be able to reach that in various different ways. I want the speed. I want the whole home coverage. So these are some of the challenges that we're seeing for the ISP, is they need a product they can deploy, which they do not have to keep on swapping out each time there's an increase. So the product needs to grow. The CPE, the Wi-Fi mesh needs to grow with the increase in broadband speeds that we're actually putting out there. So the way we need to do this is look at those CPE devices and the technologies we use to ensure that they can grow and deliver for the customer. It's all about keeping the customer happy at the end of the day. If the customer's not happy, they're either going to move, they're going to maybe, as we increase, not take the next step with us. Maybe they're going to say, well, the last step I took did nothing for me. Yeah, so what's the point? That's no good for the ISP, and it's no good for us as vendors here. Revenue slows down, right? Not what we want. So being able to fulfill the product that is required is one of the challenges and one of the things we have to step up and meet. So just looking at some of the things that we need to be looking at. If we are delivering, we've already been speaking here about this year, as Andrew said, 2024 is going to, XGS PON is there, 10 gig. That's good, but if we're delivering that on the WAN side, we need to be able to effectively connect to that and be able to use technologies to deliver on that in the home. So having devices that have the connectivity for the WAN side to start with, that flexibility of being able to connect that, whether that be a direct fiber in, or whether you're going to use a 10 gig Ethernet connection for your WAN, having the flexibility in the product is imperative. Again, as that grows from 1 gig to 2.5 and getting up to the 10 gig, the last thing the customer wants, but the last thing the ISP wants, is having to swap that product out all the time. That all costs money. That all hits their bottom line. That's not a good thing. It's also disruption to the customer, and there is the potential that when you're rolling those different products out each time you get an increase in speed, that you can impact the service. You end up requiring maintenance. You end up requiring truck rolls, having engineers going to site. All costs again, which is what we have to try and avoid. And so going with a product that actually has the ability to grow to that in the first place is a good choice. So also stands to reason, if you've got 10 gig coming in, then you want to be able to have a 10 gig connectivity on the inside to be able to utilize that 10 gig broadband. So having devices with not just a 10 gig WAN, but also a 10 gig LAN capability. Following on from that, Andrew also mentioned about Wi-Fi 7, right, the last meter. I'd kind of argue with that a little bit and hope it's a bit more than a meter, but I get your point. So Wi-Fi 7 certainly brings us, as Andrew mentioned, the capability of the speed, the connectivity, the ability to be able to get onto the network and utilize that XGS PON 10 gig broadband WAN. But then we have the challenge of getting that around the home. So it's not just about the first device as we hit the home, it's about spreading that around the rest of the home. So talking about Wi-Fi mesh there and getting that into the different areas of the home to deliver the connectivity and the speed and the coverage that the customer base wants. And again, that actually grows with the services. As the services increase on the WAN, we need to ensure that the product is capable of utilizing that in the home. And along with all this, we need to be conscious that there needs to be some level of management and control and monitoring for the ISP. Again, if they're putting this in the home, they need to ensure that they can actually continue to deliver that service, make sure it's stable, and if the customer calls and says, hey, you know, I couldn't get my iPhone connected XYZ on this service at this time, they have the ability to go back, diagnose, and look at that and be able to support the customer, again, avoiding any truck rolls. So, I've already mentioned this to the guys, this is why I'm going to do a quick jump over 2 slides because it didn't really flow. Wi-Fi mesh. So, Wi-Fi mesh, we all see that as, okay, I have my router and I'm going to put APs. Done, finished, Wi-Fi mesh, right? It's not quite as easy as that. We all know that the challenges in the people's homes are going to be around different building types, different sizes, different areas. Some of them may have big stone walls. Can you really use a Wi-Fi backhaul to create the mesh? So it's imperative that we, as an industry, we have multiple solution type products to be able to get that Wi-Fi mesh capability in the home to give that coverage. So devices that may be using an Ethernet as the backhaul, maybe power over Ethernet to actually power those devices. Also, maybe they're getting an Ethernet cable to that location is difficult as well. So maybe the requirement for Wi-Fi mesh being delivered on a backhaul over power line. And also mesh devices for outside. All of these products enable the delivery of that Wi-Fi service, the Wi-Fi connectivity in the home that then allows for the utilization of the broadband, high-speed, XGS-PON network that they're actually connecting to. So, there you go back one. So, I mentioned about management for the ISP, controlling the network and looking at that. That's all has to be around standards. There's a number of organizations, obviously the guys out there doing the various different ACS and management platforms. And with the new technologies or the new standards, 369 USP type stuff, where you can actually not just look at the first device, not just looking at the router, but actually getting in to the home and monitoring and analyzing the Wi-Fi mesh devices that are in the home, and then from there going on and seeing the clients and seeing how they're performing, where they're connecting, what the speeds. All of these are becoming very, very important to the ISP. They were challenges before, and we're actually removing some of these challenges. As an industry, we're actually looking at that in a very sensible way with these standards. Yeah? So very, very important to allow and help and enable the ISP to be profitable, to monetize, to be able to keep profitable in their deliveries. And finally, talking about standards, very, very important. Again, I've mentioned about the management standards, the 369 USP, things like that. We talked about mesh, but of course, we need to be talking about easy mesh. We need to be talking about enabling the customer. Of course, we all want, as vendors, we all want them to buy only our kit. We don't want them to buy anybody else's. But the reality is that there are, we would say in the UK, horses for courses. So specific products for specific jobs. And it stands to reason that you're not going to cover every single scenario. So you need those standards to come together and enable a set of products to be able to work with each other from the various vendors. And although we stand here and look at each other and say, no, don't do that. But in reality, we know as an industry that has to happen. And it's the right thing to happen. Yeah, and that also leads into these other standards, being able to implement those and again, make products work together, make that easier for the ISP, make that easier for the customer, and remove these challenges that can come along. Okay, the topic here is challenges of FTTH or the multi-gig, but those challenges push across into the whole environment, the whole scenario. So having these standards, being governed by the various different organizations, very, very important, and things that we have to focus on and concentrate on as industry vendors, and I would say sitting up here, industry leaders, right? So very, very important to do. And that is where we see the challenge. Getting those devices, those standards, the connectivity, and making sure they grow as the WAN speed and the multi-gig increases. Those devices have to be able to go with it and be able to fulfill the requirement of the customer. So thank you. That's me done.
Thank you, Paul, for your great presentation.
Thank you.
And now let's have our last speaker, Ronan Kelly, CTO of Adtran for EMEA and APAC. He has also 30 years of industry experience, held several senior roles and leadership positions amongst operate vendors and industry bodies, including our former president of the FTTH Council Europe. He's a passionate engineer, and now let's welcome with me Ronan to elaborate on this Adtran's perspective. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. Morning, everybody. Now, I know it was a late night last night, and we're on day 3 of the conference, but let's try that one again. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. So, 20 years on. 20 years ago, the Fibre to the Home Council Europe was founded. At that point in time, there was 2 million households in Europe had access to a full fibre connection, 1% of the number of households. And we had what felt like a daunting task in front of us, an impossible task. But as you heard yesterday during the opening keynotes, and some of the speakers this morning reiterated it as well, we're now at the 70% of households can now access a full fibre connection if they choose to do so, which is a fantastic achievement. And we're on a really solid trajectory now as we go forward over the next 5 years to really get close to that full ubiquitous fibre connectivity being available to all households. But with that, the macro environment is changing, and the considerations for the service providers, the operators, if you will, that have built and deployed these networks need to change, and they need to focus on different aspects of their business to ensure that they have a long and profitable future as they go forward. And I want to share with you some of the thoughts with regard to how, through simplification, the service providers can really amplify the resources and the impact of the resources that they have available to them. There's quite a few familiar faces in the audience today, but for those of you that I haven't met, as Jan mentioned, I'm Adtran's CTO. I'm actually CTO for EMEA. I don't have APAC anymore, thankfully. But I'm Ronan Kelly, so nice to meet with you. Just to give you a feel for the level of progress, what you'll see on the screen behind me is some of the data that's compiled on behalf of Fibre to the Home Council Europe by iDate. And iDate basically work with the operators across the whole of Europe to ascertain their progress with regard to their fibre build-outs from both a homes passed perspective, but also from a subscriber adoption perspective as well, how many people are taking the services. And based on the forecast data that iDate shared last year, they anticipate that by 2028, we'll have gotten to 95% of homes passed with full fibre connectivity, which is a fantastic achievement. We're making really, really good progress on this front. But as I mentioned, once we get to that full fibre connectivity, the macro environment for the service providers is being changed as a result of that. And what we're seeing is a number of challenges that the service providers face into as a result of this very high capacity connectivity being made available on a ubiquitous basis. First of all, to continue on with the build out of the networks, but also the operation of these networks as they go forward. Unfortunately, funding and access to funding has become much more challenging. We've seen interest rates increase significantly, driven by inflation post-COVID across the developed world. In addition to that, a lot of the funding that had been brought in towards the industry by private equity investors and also some government agencies as well. We've seen some large players who are tapping into those funds that are available and rolling out very, very large projects, effectively hoovering up huge chunks of the funding that's available. And congratulations to them for being able to achieve that. I mentioned City Fibre and Deutsche Glasfaser on the screen behind me. That's not to be aimed at them. It's just an example of some of these very large-scale players that are taking up large chunks of the funding that's available. But when that funding comes out of the pool, it means there's less funding available for a lot of the smaller operators who are trying to build out their fibre networks as well. So it's something they need to be cognizant of. We're also seeing, from an investor perspective, the focus has shifted. The vanity metric, if you will, of homes passed is no longer the measure of success for a fibre builder these days. Instead, the focus has shifted, with a lot of pressure coming from the investors themselves towards subscribers on the network. It's great fun building the networks, it's great fun spending the money to build these networks, but ultimately they've got to make money at the end of the day. They've got to get subscribers on, and they've got to get paying customers, paying the bills for the business. Now, as part of that pressure to increase the number of subscribers on the network, what we're seeing is competitive intensity within the marketplace also increasing. We're seeing the cost of services continually go downwards, where now, across most of the fibre-rich countries across Europe, you can now access gigabit or multi-gigabit services quite often for less than €30 per month, which is exceptional value if you think about the utility that that can deliver for consumers. And one would imagine, with that sort of value being available, people would be flocking onto these fibre networks. But unfortunately, it's still not the case. There's more to be done to get subscribers on. And we've seen with some of the operators now, they're giving away increasingly long periods of free connectivity to try and entice people out of their contracts that they're currently in and get them over onto the network. So cost of capital is going up. Competitive intensity is putting downward pressure on the revenue for the services that are being sold. But unfortunately then, we've also got inflationary costs that are driving up the OpEx of the business. And that's everything from trying to attract in and retain the talent that's needed to design, to build, to deploy, and to operate these networks. Because everybody's trying to attract in the same resources, so it's putting upward pressure on wages. Who remembers the dot-com boom, when the cost of an IP network engineer went through the roof? We're in a similar type scenario here. Energy costs. Now, thankfully, they're not as bad as what they were kind of in the peak where we saw a 25-fold increase in the cost of energy in Europe 2 years ago. But they're still about 5 times what they were at the bottom of the market back in 2020. And that's cost that's getting absorbed by the operators. It's erosion of the bottom line profitability of the business. And then you've got inflationary costs of equipment itself. There's very few people in the room today paying less for the equipment to deploy their network now than what they were paying 2 or 3 years ago. Equipment has all gone up as a result of these costs being pushed through the industry. Off the back of thousands of conversations with hundreds of operators, from the smallest guys right through to the very, very largest guys in the industry, we've heard a very clear message of what service providers believe they need to be successful. And it really boils down to 3 key things. And that's simplicity, flexibility, and efficiency. And the simplicity side of things is trying to address that challenge of, I can't attract in and retain skilled labor cost effectively. So I need people with lower skill sets to be able to do the sorts of jobs I need to get my network deployed. So hence the solutions that get rolled out in the network need the complexity removed out of them so that more people in the company can do those deployment jobs, so that the networks can be designed with greater ease. On the flexibility side of things, service providers don't want to be carrying 15 different SKUs of equipment to try and roll out their network across the different scenarios that they encounter on a day-to-day basis. They need a very simplified portfolio that allows them to address every single use case. And on the efficiency side, I mentioned the cost of energy. Having best-in-industry energy efficiency is table stake. But efficiency doesn't just stop at energy consumption. It's also about the efficiency with which the equipment can be deployed, how much resource it's consuming from a point of view of rack space, energy to drive it, air conditioning to cool the equipment, but also the operational efficiency. How many clicks does a customer care representative have to go through to extract the information they need to try and provide best-in-class service for their customers as they deal with this equipment as well? When we look at the end-to-end network, if we go from the customer prem over on your left-hand side, all the way through to the handoff point to either the peering points or the internet, you can see it's quite a complex environment. There are a lot of touch points. There are a lot of things that can potentially go wrong. But the challenge is, how do you enable either the consumer themselves or the customer care representative to very quickly hone in on where there may be a problem so that they don't waste time troubleshooting in the wrong areas? So for example, if a service provider lost all its IP connectivity, rarely happens, but sometimes it does, there's very little point in having your customer care representative teams troubleshooting Wi-Fi on the end of the phone with the customers. So it's about trying to bring common sense to the troubleshooting and the fault finding so that we can very quickly draw their attention to where the problems lie within the network. And this is where today, with modern management systems, modern orchestration systems, we have full visibility end-to-end, particularly for vendors who can provide the end-to-end chain. We have full visibility of that end-to-end data path, the services that flow over it, and the telemetry related to the services across all of the pieces of equipment. So we can very quickly ascertain, does this customer, for the internet connection that they're trying to use, is there IP connectivity available for the entire network, including this customer? That's a simple yes or no answer, and that should have a nice big green tick on that customer care representative screen. Is there fiber connectivity to the network element that's ultimately bringing the service to that customer? Because if the device that's trying to service the customer is disconnected from the rest of the network, again, there's no point in troubleshooting all the other bits. And then if it comes down to all the other bits are good, which hopefully most of the time they are, have we got an interference issue in the customer prem? Have we got a congestion issue? Is it coverage? Are 30% of the customer's devices showing a really, really weak Wi-Fi signal, and that's probably contributing to their problems? So it's about really calling out where the problem statement exists and drawing the customer care person's eye to that information. Or, if it's beyond the capabilities of customer care person, so let's say it's working further back in towards the core of the network, it's about driving automatic escalations. We shouldn't have to run people through the ringer of going through the 15 different questions before we realize, yeah, this is above my pay grade, I need to escalate. We should be trying to drive that type of activity on an automated basis so the journey for the customer from initial fault reporting through to resolution is much, much faster. And this is where we see the next phase when it comes to modern operators being able to tap into automation, being able to tap into artificial intelligence, being able to leverage things like multimodal generative AI so that we can very quickly present, whether it's to a customer themselves through the app on their phone, or whether it's through a customer care representative who's on the front line trying to work out what's going on here. We can present that information in a very clean, succinct fashion that will allow the service provider's ability to scale with interactions with their customers without throwing people at the front line. Instead, using tools like Gen AI, etc., to allow those interaction points scale much more efficiently and deliver the information that the consumer needs to know with regard to the health and state of their service in a much more efficient fashion. So to summarize how service providers, through simplification, can really amplify the impact that they can have with regard to their customer satisfaction levels. First of all, we need to empower the end customers and the customer care teams. If we've got an outage that is going to impact the service for 50, 100, 50,000, whatever the number is, customers, and we know they're impacted by it, rather than taking the traditional approach of, the ostrich strategy, let's bury our head and wait and see who calls in. As an industry, I think we need to get a lot more proactive about this, and we need to call it out to the customers. Most of the time, service providers will have an app on the customer's phone that they can communicate information to the customer. And in the feedback that we get, when people get proactive about communication, the satisfaction ratings go up much, much higher, even in the case where there are faults. So you need to proactively communicate your known issues. And then finally, leveraging AI to identify recurring, but also future trends in the network so that we can proactively get to remove potential fault points within the network before they ever become a problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ronan, for an excellent presentations. And I'd like to thank everybody on this panel for sticking on the time for their presentations. And now we have room for some questions and answers. So let me encourage to ask your questions. I just noticed we have 140, 150 years industry experience on the stage. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but at least it gives us a unique opportunity to ask a lot of questions. So please, if you have one question, introduce quickly yourself and ask your question. Before we start, let me please start with my own question. I have a pile of that. Since we're here in Germany, I was just wondering, are there any specifics? We are still in the process of rolling out FTTH, so we are not as mature than in other markets. And can you elaborate if there are, from an ISP challenges perspective, anything specific, or is there no specific challenges from your experience? Maybe you start with Ron.
Sure, I might say a few words on that. I think one of the things that's become abundantly clear, both from my time, as Jan mentioned, as president of the Fibre to the Home Council Europe in the past, but also the last 14 years working in the fibre space on the vendor side, has been, it's very, very clear and it's well documented that in markets where there was very little, I'll call it next generation copper access, so whether that was VDSL or G-Fast or whether it was DOCSIS 3.1 on the cable side of things, where that's not present. So take markets like Spain, for example, markets like the French market, which were very late to allow the introduction of VDSL technology, and there was very little cable to begin with. What we saw was there was very strong pent-up demand amongst the consumers. So when fibre started to become available, adoption rates were very, very high from the beginning and continue to be high. They have some of the highest penetration rates across the developed world at this point. Whereas markets like Germany, for example, where you've got a lot of VDSL deployed, you've also got a lot of DOCSIS 3 cable deployed, and more recent years we've seen that VDSL being upgraded to super vectoring VDSL, which can deliver 200 meg per second. That creates a challenge for the fibre providers because quite often the pent-up demand from a consumer perspective has been addressed. And this is where I believe governments have a major role to play. If they want their nations to be amongst the world's digital leaders, they need the nations to transition over to fibre, to unleash the future capabilities that it can bring for the nation. But in order to do that successfully, they need to incentivize consumers to move over onto these fibre-based mediums, and that's where policy needs to be looking towards. We see some initiatives around copper switch-off, for example, in some nations across Europe, and I think that's a good starting point, but I think also we need to go further than that. We need to look at the consumers themselves and say, what actions can a government take to change the behavior of the consumers?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Hans.
I agree fully to that. So there are new initiatives taken that you get a funding per subscriber changing the sets, so less the funding on the operator, more the funding on the end user, so there are new approaches taken. And one set which is specific, not now to only Germany, but let's say to other countries, there is the cost of per homes passed and the cost of per homes connected, let's say impacted heavily on the region where you try to deploy it. So we're talking here about 2,000–3,000 euros per homes passed set, what is not in favor of going in addition to what you mentioned before with the high availability of a good copper service, and also affects the service classes. Now in Germany they try to do with the DIN 18220, the trenching DIN to counterpart that a little bit, but yeah, let's see if there's an effective move in.
Thank you very much. Please.
Yeah. Hi, Dean Bubley from Disruptive Analysis. So I probably spend about 80% of my time doing wireless rather than fibre, so this is a little bit new to me. But I'm sort of, I've outed myself in the past on 5G as being a slice denier. I think it's unworkable. Why do we think it's going to work better on fibre? Now, clearly, obviously, homes don't move, so we've got a little bit more predictability, so that's good. But you also do have long-lived devices on one end and variable Wi-Fi and internal construction, as we heard about from TP-Link, and at the other end, you've got peering in the internet. Where did this idea of slicing, or are we trying to recreate the idea of sort of circuit switching in an optical world?
You want?
So
Maybe we start with you, Andrew.
yeah, I guess I opened the discussion on slicing, so I'm to blame a bit. It is true that the idea of slicing originated from the mobile network. And what you see there specifically, because we also, as Nokia, work in the mobile side of the network, of course, as I mentioned, fiberization, we still have a lot of work to do in Germany, in the US, certain locales throughout the world, but FWA and mobile will be the answer, or fixed wireless access and 5G rather, will be the answer for how we get to the last connections that require multi-gigabit broadband. But slicing for slicing's sake, as we've learned from the mobile side of the network, isn't really beneficial. But in the broadband space, I think you've heard all the presenters talk about, and at this conference, it's been a feature this time in Madrid, in Vienna. We talk about outcomes for the subscriber. There is a specific mission that can be benefited here by slicing, and that is coordinating all of the networks, not just the access network, but the middle, as we call it in the US, the middle mile, the transport network, the IP core, but most importantly, the home network, where you have a very dynamic environment, different generations of Wi-Fi, a lot of pollution, interference, mitigation, all those kind of things. And as Wi-Fi becomes the new Ethernet in the home, you need to be able to provide that level of performance when going to work, going to school, even playing, socializing, depends on that connectivity. That's an essential part of life. And providing a framework that is standard, that is open, that is systematic to allow that deterministic performance, we think is important. There's a lot of operator and industry interest in this. So this may finally be the time that slicing becomes a thing.
Hans, you have additional comments?
I would like to start to answer two comments from you. The first one, slicing in 5G doesn't take up. Fully agreed. Main reason is 5G NSA doesn't support it. Very frank and honest. So if you have a 5G NSA technology which doesn't support to do it, 5G SA is rarely deployed. Now, slicing in fixed access has absolutely nothing to do with slicing in mobile. It's a term which is reused, from my perspective, ensuring a certain guarantee of service, either for a single customer or for a service for a customer group or customer. Meaning, you have in 50G-PON XGEM headers. The XGEM headers are frame blocks. You assign certain frame blocks for certain bandwidth to certain services to certain users, and can such as guarantee a bandwidth in a user pool to one user, which is subtracted from the mass. That's the basic idea. So I have splitter 164. I have a customer group. I have the one enterprise who gets 10 gigs symmetrical. Done. The rest of the 40 gigs are shared between the others. It's a simple approach, just. That's the basic slicing of 50G. It's a little more complex, but let's simplify that. Now, this represented in the next step, and they're picking up basically then the transport and the representation of, let's say, the path end-to-end through, is that this approach of guaranteed service or guaranteed quality of service must be reflected in the Wi-Fi set on the one side to the end customer, last meters, and in the transport network to have then really the approach through for the service. On the access set, Wi-Fi 7 gives a pretty good approach. You have the possibility to have there with an OML, basically carrier aggregation with some bandwidth aggregation points. Yes, why not? On the other side, you use segment routing MPLS. You could do a bandwidth guarantee for this specific service for this slice. Started with IPv6 directly on the OLT, passing through your network with the bandwidth guarantee set. But as said, the slicing approach of 5G, which says adapt your virtual infrastructure accordingly to your latency, jitter, whatever needs dynamically in your network, forget that in fix. Sorry to say that very honest.
Thank you, Hans. Ronan, do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, it kind of builds on what I was talking about earlier around simplicity. There are lots of different ways that we can guarantee quality of service, a user experience across different networks. And I always remember very early in my career, my boss at the time had a particular perspective with regard to complex quality of service mechanisms. And his view was, I can absolutely implement state-of-the-art queuing systems to guarantee traffic of different types across the network. And I can put in place the expensive equipment that will allow that to happen. And I can train my engineers to become sufficiently sophisticated to be able to program those environments and maintain those environments. Or I can buy a bigger, fatter pipe, which a bigger, fatter pipe next year will be cheaper than the equipment that's needed to drive the QoS mechanism. And that was his ethos. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's no place for quality of service within networks. There absolutely is. But we have to, as an industry, balance very, very carefully as we start to go down to the very low-cost use cases, which remember, £25 per month or €25 per month for a gigabit of connectivity. You start to implement complexity out at the edge of the network when you've got a service that has so much abundant capacity that the users are not going to need that complexity out at the edge of the network. You're burdening the business with additional complexity and additional cost where it's not needed. So I think we just need to be careful on how much Kool-Aid we drink with this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Paul?
Yeah, and I want to reiterate that, and I think that that's the danger that we come up against is overcomplicating. You know, when we get, as Ronan says, well, we're going to have the bandwidth there to use. You know, do we really want to add additional costs back in again for the service provider? You know, we've all been speaking here about controlling that cost and being able to give the ISP the ability to monetize and be able to stay relevant and profitable. The last thing we then want to start doing is putting more stuff back in again, which is going to create more cost, as Ronan said. So you know, I'm from your side, Dean. I'm Wi-Fi. That's why I stood up here and presented about end devices and Wi-Fi mesh and things like that, rather than the expertise of these guys on absolute fibre. So yeah, that's the other thing I just wanted to pick up on, which kind of depressed me a little bit, was when Jan turned around and said that combined age is about nearly 150. There's 4 guys up there, and I'm thinking, well, hang on, 44 of that's mine. So, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So last chance to ask questions. If not, I'm just wondering about, it was from each of you briefly mentioned, but sustainability is a keyword. Are ISPs, are our subscribers willing to pay a little bit more on sustainability? We have the ultimate goal, net zero. We have to reduce scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Are we as vendors willingness to pay a little extra? I mean, CapEx is important. We reduce it. We try to optimize OpEx. But going back, are our customers, ISPs, and subscribers finally willing to pay a little bit more on sustainability? Paul?
The short answer to that is yes. So, but what we're seeing is that from the end customer, there's not so much eagerness to pay extra for it. They expect it. It's expected. But what we do see is there an acceptance of this needs to happen, we need to go that way. And there's certainly, you know, all the demands we're seeing, you know, even down to packaging, recycled, you know, packaging and certainly the removal of plastic from packaging and things like that. You know, yes, that adds little cost here and there, but I think there's an acceptance of that. Unfortunately, I suppose that's the word. I don't think that's something that can be passed on to the end user, because the end user's just sitting there saying, no, this is where everything's going, it's expected, that's what should happen, and I want it, period. And so between us as vendors and the ISPs, that we've got to manage that cost in there somewhere.
Thanks, thanks. Hans, you have?
Yeah, I agree. The end customer has the base expectation that the whole industry moves that path. No disagreement on that one. But as you said before, there is the, let's say, direction of the optimization of the path 1, the path 2, and the path 3, so the direct, indirect, and remote direct cost sets. And there is an impact out of that. Green packaging is one of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, the coffee break.
See you later, guys.
Thanks. It was great to have you all here. Okay. Basically, using then the tools, the FTTH, to go into the market, to go in FTTR cases, to go in campus cases, optimizing their infrastructure, saving energy, is one aspect out of that. And having there basically in the production using, let's say, recycled goods, recycled materials to generate the systems and make it an efficient process is also one of the paths. So we were proud to be announced out of 27,000 companies. We're one of 250 who got an A grade and a CDB rating. So I think this path is something which is acknowledged, number one, by our customers, and also then finally by the end customers on the product.
So Jan, I'll make a couple of comments here. When you talk about who's going to pay for a sustainable or green solution, that means you're at the point of deciding whether or not it's necessary, whether or not you're going to do it. It is becoming clear through discussions at the conference, in the industry, in Europe, globally, that we as vendors have a responsibility for that footprint. But it's not always a who pays question, as it turns out. We talked about at the outset about fiber being intrinsically green. The climate impact, sustainability is not just about the products that we ship and install. There is a broader question of resources, and by optimizing the network, by running to completion on fiberization, we benefit the industry and the operations of service providers in a positive way. And that even extends to the resources that are humans. Having to do work, having to bring complexity into the network, the conventional wisdom on that is it's more people, it's more intensity, it's more cost. But there is a way out, and it is technology. If we can automate the network and have machines manage machines, then people can do other useful things that include connecting and fiberizing the unconnected and so forth. So I think there's a positive answer there.
Thanks. Coffee is waiting, so
the last word
2 minutes.
The last word's with me. So I think it was interesting the way the question was framed, because the question inferred paying more. And in my experience, service providers and end customers, like the guys described, are not willing to pay more. They do demand, absolutely, best in class with regard to the efficiency of the solutions that they're purchasing and the green criteria of the equipment that they're purchasing, everything from how the equipment is packaged through to what gets delivered with the equipment, how it's delivered, and so on and so forth. Does having the most energy efficient OLT in the industry give a vendor differentiation? Without question. Will the service provider pay more for it? Probably not, but they will award through tender their business to that service provider. So there's absolutely massive scope for improved differentiation as a vendor if you're absolutely on top of every single piece of your end-to-end ESG policy. But will people pay more for it? Probably not.
Thank you very much. So let me then conclude our session. Just in one word, we have opportunities and we have challenges, and we will solve it. With that, let me thank the audience and our panelists once more, and let's take the coffee break.